Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Duduzile Kubeka. I am your grade 11 life sciences teacher. So the last week we had started with the topic of gaseous exchange. We are continuing with that and we'll be wrapping it up today. Yeah, we'll wrap it up today. All right, guys, I hope you are well, ne? Today, the core focus is on the structure of the gaseous exchange system as well as the ventilation of the lungs. So with human gaseous exchange, we have to allow the process of gaseous exchange to take place. We would need a respiratory system. Respiratory system consists of two elements. The very first element is the conducting system. And then we also have an interface for gas exchange. So the conducting system allows, like the word says, conducting, it allows for the movement to conduct the passage of the gases, how they enter, where they pass. That's the system, you know. And then the interface for gas exchange, that's where the process takes place now, where the gas is actually exchanged, and we'll get to learn more about how that takes place. As you can see, there's an indication of the mouth as well as the throat area over there. So there's an exchange of gases. The oxygen is the one that comes in, that you inhale, and carbon dioxide you exhale. So each time, sometimes when you do the diagrams, it won't be written that it's oxygen or carbon dioxide, but you'll probably see the color. You'll see red, which represents oxygen at all times. And when you see the blue, it would always represent carbon dioxide, especially in life sciences. I'm speaking for life sciences, and particularly for when you will be learning about oxygenated and deoxygenated blood also. Whenever you see such labels, please just take note. Red usually represents oxygenated and blue represents carbon dioxide. And then the main function of the human respiratory system, what's the main function? This is to provide the organism with oxygen, because we do need that oxygen. Remember when we learned we need the oxygen for cellular respiration. And then to also eliminate carbon dioxide, which is a toxic product of metabolism. When we say metabolism, the body breaks down sugars. Remember when we learned about cellular respiration, your body will be breaking down sugars in your body with the assistance of oxygen. And during that process, the output would be, one of the byproducts would be carbon dioxide, as well as water and energy. So carbon dioxide is the toxic product from that whole reaction, which will need to be eliminated from your body. Now here you're seeing the structure, just a basic, it's really a basic structure. It's not even in depth. Arteries in the respiratory system. Arteries here are the ones that are carrying the oxygen-rich blood, or rather what we call oxygenated blood, away from the heart. Why we say that? Because you know, when this is in an entirely different system, whereby you are learning about the heart, how it pumps blood, how the blood moves from being oxygenated to deoxygenated. In that case, there are pulmonary arteries that are carrying deoxygenated blood, right? And then after the blood goes through that whole process, then the arteries here involved in the respiratory system will be the ones that carry away that oxygenated blood from the heart to the other cells in the body. Now it will be that this artery here is the one that transports oxygenated blood to other cells of the body that need this oxygen. And this vein here that is responsible for the respiratory system is carrying what we call deoxygenated blood, or rather oxygen poor blood to the heart. So this one is involved from the very beginning. When this blood, when you breathe in and you take in oxygen, there are beads of carbon dioxide that also come in. and they will need to be taken to the heart where they will be pumped and processed. It's just the process of processing the blood, cleaning it so that you decipher, you remove the carbon dioxide, which will be excreted or eliminated from your body, and you stay behind with just the oxygenated blood. So please don't confuse the two systems of the heart as well as the respiratory system. But this here takes place in the lungs. Lungs are a very important part or very important organ in the respiratory system. And please don't forget these main functions of the respiratory system. Provide oxygen with blood, eliminates carbon dioxide from the body. Those are the two main functions. Now, efficient gaseous exchange, as I've emphasized the lungs and the respiratory system as a whole. For gas exchange to be efficient, to function optimally, so that the organism also functions optimally, the structure of this respiratory system is of utmost importance. And I've been emphasizing this, it needs to be the form fits function. I always emphasize this. So it needs to be at its optimal structure so that it can function efficiently and to allow the precise regulation of its functioning, which is to regulate the process of gas exchange. These factors here that we've mentioned, they enable the maintenance of that, which is the constant gradients between the gas concentrations. As you know, like we've been emphasizing, when you breathe in oxygen, there's a certain element of portions of carbon dioxide that you also take in. And in the body, after the cell process of cellular respiration, there is carbon dioxide that is produced as a byproduct. So the constant maintenance of this system allows and ensures that the gradients between the oxygen and carbon dioxide are maintained properly, so that you never have too much carbon dioxide in your body that it becomes too toxic, you know? So that's what happens there. And where does this happen? In the alveoli and in the blood. As we go deeper with the structures, we will get to understand where the alveoli is based and what is its function. This system, when it functions optimally, it would enable the passive transport of gases. The gases I'm talking about are this oxygen and the carbon dioxide to and from the blood, and therefore reducing the amount of energy required for gas exchange. Because if there's a problem with the system, then the body will require more energy to enable it to facilitate the process of gas exchange. But if the transport system of your respiratory system or the respiratory structure is functioning optimally, then it will just function like that with ease, without the need of having too much energy exerted. You understand? Much like when a car is driving on a downhill slope, or when you are just walking on a downhill slope, it happens with ease. It's almost like you are being pushed down. But if you were to climb up a mountain, you would need more energy exerted to climb up a mountain. So this is what it's explaining. When the surface is smooth enough, your transport system is smooth enough, the structure is smooth enough, the process functions optimally without the need of having too much energy inputted there. And then the functioning of the respiratory system can be easily accessed by the changes in the composition of what? Inhaled and exhaled air. Let's look at this one here. With inhaled air, you will have more oxygen inhaled and some proportions of carbon dioxide inhaled as well. And then with exhaled air, there is again some carbon dioxide that you will exhale. There is also some elements of oxygen that you will exhale. But what's important to note, as you can see, when you were breathing in and inhaling, you had more oxygen and very, very, very small amount of carbon dioxide. But now when you exhale, Suddenly there's 4% of carbon dioxide in this particular example, whereas when you began, you only took in 0.03. This explains what I've just told you. There's a portion of carbon dioxide that you take in when you inhale, which was this 0.03. But the other percentage now that when summed up makes 4% comes from that byproduct from cellular respiration. Remember, your body breaks down sugars and then that byproduct. So you see how much of that byproduct was there, way more than the one you took in. And that's the one that is exhaled. And now with oxygen, let's look at oxygen. You had 21% of oxygen that you inhaled. But when you exhale, there's about 16.5% that is being exhaled. Why is that? Oxygen is required in your body. The oxygen here, that is the difference here of this oxygen, actually functioned in the body. It was involved in other processes. It is required in other cells in your body to keep your body functioning optimally. So whenever you do maybe sort of these calculations or you think of it in a grander scheme of things, you can clearly see it. This is proof here that the carbon dioxide you take in is less and more is found in the body. And that's why you require an efficient gaseous exchange system to allow for the exchange of these gases. As humans, right, gaseous exchange happens in all living things. But we human beings have a similar gaseous exchange system to other mammals because we can look at our structures are pretty much similar. So that's why we would have a similar gaseous exchange system. We will then look forward as we move on, we'll look at the structure at a macro and tissue level. And we'll also learn about the location, adaptations, and function of these parts of the ventilation system, which are the trachea, the bronchioles, lungs, and alveoli. These are very important in the gaseous exchange system. So these structures here, you need to know and you need to understand them. Yeah, this is a basic structure. It might not make sense now, just showing you. We'll come back to it at a later stage as well, when we have now explained everything, so that when you, by just looking at it, you can understand the functioning of your system, the ventilation system. But looking at the very top, you have your sinuses, the nasal cavity, the oral cavity, the tongue, larynx, trachea, left bronchus, ribs, pleura, pleural space, you know, all of these ones. You can even see by their structure. I think by just looking at the structure, you can almost guess its function, but we'll delve deeper into it. And then when you get into the bronchioli over there, these are the most important ones that I've circled, the bronchioli over here. The bronchioli on its walls, that's when you find the alveoli on its walls, which are the air sacs. We'll explain in more details how this structure works. But exchanging gases in vertebrates, a summed up picture over here before we move on. Breathing, I think you remember from last week's session, it's a physical and mechanical process where air is moved in and out of the lungs. Inhalation is when the air moves into, keyword being into. Inhale is into, inside the lungs and breathing system. And exhalation, the X over there means exit. Therefore, this air is now moving out of the lungs and the breathing system. So these three, I'm repeating them because they are very key and you need to understand their definitions and never confuse them. Gaseous exchange, as I'm speaking of gaseous exchange today, this here is a chemical process. As I've shown you, you've got the gases they're exchanging. It involves what? Diffusion of gases at respiratory surfaces. So inside the lungs, there's oxygen, which is moved to the blood, and the carbon dioxide is moved to the alveoli. But when you're looking at it inside the cells, the oxygen is moved to the cells and carbon dioxide is then moved to the blood. And then cellular respiration, this is an aerobic metabolic chemical process. Why aerobic? Aerobic means there's an involvement of oxygen there. Whenever you see the word aerobic, just know there's oxygen involved in that process. This metabolic process, there's energy-rich compounds, which is the sugar there, the glucose, that is broken down in the cells to release energy for metabolism. What you require, the key requirement is oxygen, because the sugar will be there that you've taken in your body, right? There's the sugar and oxygen. But the breaking down, the metabolic process cannot take place without oxygen. You can have large amounts of sugar, but without oxygen, there won't be any metabolic process taking place. So that's why it's listed as a requirement. You need oxygen. And then the product will be carbon dioxide. There are other products as well, which is water and energy. These gases then are exchanged with the tissue fluid and the blood. Okay, guys, may you please not switch on your videos, please? We need all videos switched off during class. You see, even mine is off. So can we please maintain it like that? Thank you, everyone. And then the exercise, quickly. By what process is energy obtained from food? You can turn on your mic or you can type it in the chat box. What process? We need to take less than 2 minutes here, please, because it's just a quick recap. What process is energy obtained from food? Okay, I'll count to 10. If I don't get a response, I'm giving you the answers, right? Process that energy is obtained from food is cellular respiration. I've just explained that. A byproduct of cellular respiration is carbon dioxide, water, and energy. This energy is in the form of ATP. What is the intake of oxygen and output of carbon dioxide at a respiratory surface called? I hope you're taking notes. Gaseous exchange. These are the terminologies I've just summed up for you. The gaseous exchange is the process whereby there's an intake of oxygen and an output of carbon dioxide. Name the process of taking air into the lungs. That is the process of inhalation. When you inhale, you are taking in air into the lungs. Which processes are part of breathing? Just to name a few, we have 3. There's inhalation, which takes the ones I've just explained to you. There's inhalation, takes the fresh air to the lungs where gaseous exchange through diffusion takes place. And then the blood, which then carries oxygen to the cells for cellular respiration. Do amoebas breathe? This year, we covered last week when we looked at other organisms and how their gaseous exchange process takes place. Amoebas, when you look at them, they have a different structure to mammals and other vertebrates. So by the difference in structure, it means the process of gaseous exchange and breathing differs. With amoebas, yes, they do breathe. These organisms, all living organisms, will breathe. But amoebas breathe by diffusion through the body surface membrane because their structure is much more simpler than that of us human beings. Their diffusion can just take place through the body surface membrane. Compared to us human beings, we can't do that because our body structure is way more complicated than that. We have many more organs and many other structures. So our breathing needs to go through the nose, the nasal cavity, and then to the lungs, and then blood and other cells like that. And then a flatworm. Does a flatworm have a respiratory system? No, a flatworm does not have a respiratory system. Why? When you look at a flatworm, it has a very flat body shape. And therefore, the gaseous exchange will take place by diffusion between the air and the thin body surface membrane. So again, what I've been emphasizing, form, fit, function. You need to look at the structure. Always, when you look at a structure, you are very likely to know how it would function. The different structures cannot function the same because different body structures have different needs. So when you see them and look at these different organisms, the flatworm, the amoeba, human beings, we all have different structures and therefore our systems will not function the same. And then, do plants respire? You need to motivate this one. And please, when you answer your questions, even in tests and exams, you look at the question, read it to understand before you respond. When you look at number 6 that we just did, does a flatworm have a respiratory system? Then the second part says explain. This means your answer needs to be in 2 parts. You need to first answer this question. Does a flatworm have a respiratory system? That's a yes or no question. So in your response, in your answer, there must be a yes or a no. That's the first mark there. It goes to you responding to that. And then the second mark will go to you explaining. Same as with question 7. Do plants respire? Your question will be, your answer would be a yes or a no first. And then you will go on to motivate your answer. So pay attention to that, plus the mark allocation to guide you exactly how much information you need to put there. So yes, plants do respire because why? They need oxygen for an aerobic respiration. And then question 8, say why a hydra does not need a respiratory system. A hydra does not need a respiratory system because oxygen reaches the body cells by diffusion through the thin body wall. So these structures, such as the flatworms, hydras, amoebas, their structures are simple. So therefore, the ones that are simpler, they don't need the respiratory system since the exchange of gases can just occur by diffusion through their body surface. I hope you understood that. Now, back to moving on to the air passages now. Now we are delving deeper into the structure of the gaseous exchange system. We are focusing now on the air passages. What I mean by air passages, in how does air that you breathe in and out, where does it pass? First up, it's just a simpler one, through your nose, right? When you breathe in, you breathe in through your nose, or maybe your nose is congested. It's easier at that time to breathe in through your mouth. As we are speaking, there's air coming in the mouth, there's air coming in the nose, and there's also air coming out through the nose and coming out through the mouth. So the passage of air starts and even ends there. That's the entry point of the air.
Upper airways.
Right? Upper airways in a human will consist of the following. These 4 that I've indicated here. The very first one here is the nasal cavity. This here is the one responsible for the respiratory system, the nasal cavity. We will discuss the mouth and its functioning here, but the mouth does not play an important part in the respiratory system. It is mainly the nasal cavity. And then from the nasal cavity, the air will pass down the pharynx over here. Air passes down the pharynx. And then from the pharynx, it moves on then. As it moves down, as you see, this is the upper body of the human being, the face. Then it moves down the neck area. Down there is what we call the larynx. This is the label here. This is where the larynx is located. And then from the larynx, it moves further down to what we call the trachea. Again, it's important to understand when you are answering questions in your exam. When you're looking at this, it's easy for someone to look at this and maybe want to call this a esophagus or a throat. I understand why, but pay attention to the type of system we are focusing on. Right now, we are focused on the respiratory system. So remember the key components of that particular system so that you do not confuse it with the other systems. At times, that might even be like it's trying to trick you, where there's a label of everything else that is in the human body system. But because if that particular question or topic is referring to the respiratory system, you need to only focus on the components of the respiratory system. And then, so these are the 4 ones in the upper airways. When you are asked about the components of the upper airways in a respiratory system, you will respond nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, and trachea. And then the nasal cavity, out of those four that I've mentioned, the nasal cavity is the first section of the airways. There is the nasal cavity over there. It's the very first section of the airways. When the air gets in through your nose, it gets in through there. But what's important to note about the nasal cavity is that the entrance here is equipped with short hairs. What's the function of the hairs that you find inside your nose? They're very short and small. Sometimes in certain people, you won't even notice that there are hairs in there. There are short hairs there. What's the function of that, the hair that you find in there? It is to trap the dust particles that are suspended in air. So the air that you breathe in, like today, it's quite dusty where I am in Johannesburg. So the air has many dust particles today compared to other days. But even in other times, maybe summer, there's more pollen in the air. And then when you breathe in that air, it comes with those particles, right? So the hair inside this nasal cavity traps those dust particles so that the air that then moves inside is cleaner. It has already been removed of the dust. So that's the very first point of entry, and how, and also plays a function of body's defense mechanism from foreign objects, right? Because from the very beginning, the foreign objects, which are the dust particles, are then trapped here. And then as it moves on here in this nasal cavity, inside the nasal cavity, you have what we call the mucous membrane. Mucus, you find mucus in your nose, right? In the nasal cavity. This mucal membrane that is lining the nasal cavity. The mucous membrane lining the nasal cavity. So the mucus is not just there to irritate you, especially when you're sick. No, it is also another body's defense mechanism, because it is covered by what? By ciliated epithelium, as well as numerous mucus glands. The glands here, the mucus glands, are the ones that secrete the mucus. And then you also they have this ciliated epithelium that you find there. We are still inside the nasal cavity. The mucus here that is secreted by the mucus glands, they also trap the smaller dust particles that could not be contained in the hairs there in the entrance. So there are certain dust particles that will escape the hair. Maybe they were smaller. So they'll be trapped in the mucus, which was secreted by the mucus glands. What else is trapped there? There's also bacteria and other foreign particles, like I've said, maybe pollen or something else in the air. Maybe they've just sprayed some spray. So that will also be trapped in that mucus. And then these then that are trapped there, they will be moved by the cilia. Where do you find the cilia? The cilia are that of the ciliated epithelium here, ciliated epithelium. Then it is moved towards the pharynx, where they are pushed to the alimentary canal. This is the alimentary canal. So it will pass by the pharynx over here, and then down to the alimentary canal. That's the movement. In this way, the air that is entering the nasal cavity will be cleaned and moistened. And what happened to those dust particles there? Because they're trapped in the hair and the mucus, you'll maybe blow your nose. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. When you blow your nose, the mucus that you excrete from there contains those dust particles. You can even notice maybe on a very dusty day, or maybe when a room that was dusty and you were cleaning. When you blow your nose after that, the mucus that you excrete there will have a lot of dust. Or if maybe you don't have mucus and you just put a tissue in your nose, you will find that you remove a lot of dust. That dust was trapped in the hair, or the dust that comes out with the mucus was trapped there. So the rest of the air that is moved by the cilia there, that is moved down towards the pharynx and the alimentary canal, is now cleaner and it is moist. It means now it can actually go inside the body. It's cleaner, it's moist, and it can move easily in your body towards the other components of this respiratory system. Now we are done with that part where it's now moved from the nose, the nasal cavity and the pharynx, right? The mucous membrane of the nasal cavity, what we need to know is that highly vascularized. So it's not just a membrane that's simple excreting mucus. No, it's very vascularized. It's vascular. So it has other functions as well, such as warming the air that's flowing over it. So it's not just producing mucus there. It's also going to warm the air that comes in, so that the air that then passes from the nasal cavity into the pharynx and then to the larynx is warm. So the air that you breathe in through your nose, here, the air you breathe in through your nose, which passes through the nasal cavity, will be warm because what? It was warmed up in the vascularized mucous membrane. The difference now, as I said, I'll explain the difference between air you breathe in through the nose and air you breathe in through the mouth. If you breathe in through your mouth, the air that you inhale through your mouth will not be cleaned, it will not be moistened, and it will not be warmed. Why? Because in your mouth, you do not have those mucous membranes that will trap those dust particles. You do not have the hairs that will trap the dust particles. You do not have the membrane that will warm up that air. Because when it enters through your mouth, it enters through the buccal cavity. And therefore, the air that will then move from your mouth to the pharynx, it means that air was not cleaned at all. As opposed to the air you breathe in through your nose, that we've seen that is being cleaned and is moistened and is warmed. So that's the key differences between the two. Now we are moving on to the larynx now. The air has moved in down to the the air is now moving on to the larynx. The larynx will then lead that air into the trachea. There, the trachea is over here, right? The larynx is around here. So the larynx is the one that will lead the air into the trachea. Now, this structure of a trachea can remind you maybe of a branch of a tree. As you can see, when you look deeper here, it will branch off to other smaller branches, right? It will branch off to what we call the left bronchi and the right bronchi. So it's branching off there. It's branching off into the lungs. So the trachea branches off into the lungs. The left bronchi you will find in the left lung. The right bronchi you will find in the right lung. And then once inside the lungs now, in those bronchi, each bronchus, in plural, in singular, it's bronchi, but in plural, it's bronchus. It will divide, it further divides. Like I said, look at a branch of a tree. If you could grab a branch of a tree, you'll see how it branches off to other smaller branches. Yeah? So that's exactly the structure here. It's very similar to that. It will then progress, it will branch off and divide into what? Progressively finer bronchi and bronchioles. So these are finer, much smaller, né? And form what we call the bronchial tree. Like you can see here, this looks like a tree. When you're looking at it, it represents a tree, right? So it further branches up into what we know as the bronchial tree. And then these terminal bronchioles, again, it keeps on branching off into smaller and smaller and smaller components. They branch to form several respiratory ducts. The several respiratory ducts over here, they end in blind sacs. And those sacs over there, and the walls of these ducts and sacs, at the walls of those ones, there are tiny bulges. What are those bulges called? The alveoli. So these bulges here that you see, these are what we call the alveoli. They play a very important part in gaseous exchange. If there's a blockage in any of the systems that we've mentioned here, your entire respiratory system will suffer. And then, no, this one, again, remember we have just explained it's very complicated at the top there with the upper respiratory system, because on one end you have your throat, your nose, your mouth, and then one can maybe confuse it with how exactly is maybe food not passing through to your lungs, you know? How does the body ensure that, because they are so close to each other, the structure is so linked to each other, how is that ensured? How do you make sure that when you eat, how do you know your food won't end up in the lungs? Because the structure is so close to each other. If you see, the esophagus is just so next to the trachea, how do you make sure that it doesn't pass on to the other side? So this here explains that you've got the structure here, and then the function. You have your nostrils or your mouth, right? Where they provide the passage for air that we've just explained. The one that passes through the mouth is not clean, is not warm, and is not moist. But the air that passes through the nostrils has gone through all of those three passages. And the nasal cavity that we've just explained, we explained the nasal cavity, the air that moves in there gets to be cleaned, the dust particles are trapped, and then the air that is cleaner is being moved down. But now with the pharynx which is in the throat, it forms part of what? It forms part of two systems, and that's why I said you need to pay attention to the system that is being asked at that particular time. The pharynx, it forms part of both the respiratory system and a digestive system. So the pharynx opens up to two things. In the respiratory system, it will open up to the trachea. But in the digestive system, it opens up to the esophagus. So that's what's important. In the digestive system, food will flow from the pharynx to what we call the esophagus. But in the respiratory system, the air will flow from the pharynx to the trachea. And then we have this important structure here, which is the epiglottis. This epiglottis is the one that will cover the opening of the trachea, which is also called the glottis, and it will prevent choking, because if the food were to move in through to the trachea, then you would choke, because that system is made only for air. And now when food, which is a solid, moves into that system, it will present a blockage of that air. And then air cannot flow freely. Oxygen cannot move in, carbon dioxide cannot move out freely. Then you will choke. So epiglottis is a very important structure that plays a role there. It ensures that the opening of the trachea is blocked when you move, when you eat. And it will, so that your food can be redirected. It's much like in a train. Have you seen the train tracks, the railway tracks? When it has to move into the right direction, the other route will be closed off so that it can only flow in one direction. But if it needs to move to the left side, the other right side will be closed, will be blocked, so that the train can only be directed toward the left. So the epiglottis plays a similar role. Then the larynx, which is the voice box, it channels the air, which is through what? The pharynx, larynx, and then the trachea. So the larynx is a very important part there, as we've noticed, right? Then we've got the trachea. We've already explained the trachea. Trachea is C-shape of rings, which allows the esophagus, right? It is lying next to the trachea to expand when food is swallowed. So those C-rings there, they allow that esophagus, when food is swallowed, it will extend, it will narrow down to allow the esophagus to expand, to allow food to pass through. Bronchi, which are the C-shaped cartilage rings. Important to note, they are cartilage as they keep on branching further and further. It keeps them from collapsing. This cartilage keeps them from collapsing. and therefore allows air to flow freely in and out of the lungs and also form smaller bronchioles. And then bronchioles end in those small tiny sacs that we've seen that are called alveoli. In the alveoli, as I've explained, is the very, very important part, play a very, very important role in respiratory exchange. Why? It is surrounded by a network of many, many blood capillaries. This here, the blood capillaries, and then gaseous exchange in lungs happens between the alveoli and blood capillaries, because the exchange there will happen between the blood and these capillaries over there in the lungs. So that is the important one. I will, as you can see, this is the structure. As you can see, the food here, when food enters, you see the structure is much more open. Food enters here, and there, that's the epiglottis. It's blocking over here. You see this blue structure, it's blocking the entrance to the trachea. So food can only be redirected to the esophagus. But right now, when the food has passed, then the epiglottis has now moved to the side. You see, this epiglottis then moves to the side when food has passed. Okay, we are almost out of time, so I will leave it here today. Next week, we'll discuss the lungs and we'll go into the internal and external structure of the lungs. For now, this is it for our lesson, but just to talk to you, how are you guys? Can I hear one of you at least? Tell me hi, my name is who, like just introduce yourself. I need to hear at least one voice to know I'm with actual people in class. Or should I call you out? Can someone talk to me, please? Okay, then it's fine if you won't talk to me. So today's lesson is, last week I emphasized on the power of thought. This week I want to emphasize on the power of words. Be mindful of how you talk to yourself. The same way you would want to be polite when talking to people you do not know or people you know. You know, when you speak to someone you love, think of someone you love so much, whether it's your mother or your friend or anyone that you really, really love. Think of how you speak to them. You speak to them with so much kindness and so much love and so much encouragement. You encourage them. You know, you build, you motivate when you speak to those people because you love them. Now, I want you to give yourself the love that you give to other people. That's why I said, think of someone that you love so, so much, way more than you think you love yourself. And try also extend that love to yourself. So when you think, let's say after you receive your test marks, the talk you give to yourself, be mindful of the words you speak to yourself and about yourself. Be mindful of words that come out of your mouth. I emphasize this because I always say we are such powerful beings. And now I don't know what religion you belong to, and it really does not matter if you belong to any religion. At the end of it all, what we have learned, what I have learned, and this is my personal story, it does not have to apply to you. When I was growing up, I was taught that God created the heavens and the earth, right? And how he created them was that he spoke. He spoke things into being. He said, let there be light, and there was light. He spoke things into existence, and the world we now know today are things he spoke and they happened. He spoke into the seas, only flowing up to certain points. Until this day, they've maintained that. So that same being that I am told spoke things into being, I was also told that that same being then created me. And when he created me, he breathed his spirit into me. Now think of a juice, or maybe we bought a 2-liter Coke and we are all sharing it into our own glasses, right? We are all drinking the same Coke from the same bottle. bottle. It's just that it's now in smaller glasses. That is exactly how I see it. If that being who spoke the heavens and the earth into being breathed his spirit into me, then that same spirit that created the heavens and the earth is the same spirit that exists in me. That means I can also speak things into being. If I think on something and if I speak it, it is as good as creating it. It is as good as saying the universe, when you read certain quotes and they say when you want something, the universe conspires for you to get it. That's how I think of it. But I think of it as what is in me is far much greater than what is outside in the world. So the power you possess in you is far greater than anything you've ever imagined. The spirit that is the God that created the heavens and the earth is the spirit that is inside you. So that means if today you were to speak and say, Mina, I will pass grade 11. Mina, I will overcome this sickness. Mina, I will get that dream home that I want. Or I will buy that dream car. You are speaking it, and therefore you are creating it. As soon as you do that, these are powerful. Your body, your attitude will eventually change, and you will act in ways that will allow you to attain that which you have spoken. And that's why it is important that what you speak is something that is building, that is positive. What you speak to yourself and what you speak to other people. Have you noticed when someone says something mean to you, it will really hurt you, even if it's someone you don't know, even if you think when you are someone who just doesn't care. When someone says something mean, it stings. And maybe for some, it will take longer to get over it, others much quicker. But the fact is, it stings. And that shows you the power of words. They are so powerful. Now, if mean words can sting so much from people you don't know, can you imagine how positive, building, encouraging words could do for you who loves yourself and care for yourselves? How much it would do for people around you who you love and care for. So if you speak something, speak it with that knowledge, knowing that you are a God yourself. And it's also easier to respect and honor people, regardless of age, regardless of ranks, regardless of background, regardless of religion or cultural beliefs, regardless of whatever, because when you see another human being, you will also recognize the greatness in them, and you will treat them with love and respect, because we are all gods in our own rights. And the people who tend to flourish in life, who tend to achieve more, are people who understand the power they possess, and they own up to it, and they believe it with their whole hearts that nothing can tell them otherwise. And once you have that belief that like you are crazy, believe it like you are crazy, believe it like no obstacles exist, you will push much harder at the things you want. And I promise you, you will achieve them. When you think of, look at things you have now, and remember a time when maybe you dreamt of those things and you achieved them. That's how powerful self-thought is, and that's how powerful your words can be. So if there's anything to remember and take from today, is you are powerful, guys. You are powerful more than you can imagine. So speak to yourself and remind yourself of that greatness every day. Thank you so much. That is the end for me. Bye, everyone. See you next week, and all the best with your week. Keep safe